we got 4,000 pounds of bison and we ain't got a clue what to do with it. We brought in the pros. This guy here's gonna show us all the ins and outs of processing this. We're gonna learn as we go along with y'all. Benny, thank you so much for helping us.
Absolutely, man. This is a pleasure.
Man, this is a heck of a task, man. It's a lot of meat.
Y'all got some big animals in there. It's gonna be fun.
So, Benny, you got a second to tell us about your business real quick?
Yeah.
Don't cut your finger off, but just a little filler.
We'll be rolling. So I'm running Redemption Meat. We're a mobile animal processor. Right now we're working all across the state of Mississippi. So we specialize in on-farm butchery. So we'll take our kill trailer out to the farm. We'll process the animal there, skin it, bring it back, and then cut it up after a few weeks of aging. The customer comes and picks it up from there. So it's a kind of a novel thing. We're the first in Mississippi to do it. It's being done around the country in a few other places, but all around, it's the most humane, most ethical way to do it, most environmentally friendly way to do it, and it's just, you know, hopefully I see it as the future of the meat industry.
So I bet y'all are wondering how we got to where we're at here. We got 5 bison in this walk-in cooler that we hauled back from North Dakota, and we're just estimating it as 4,000 pounds of meat. They were all about 3,000 pound bison, so we're just guessing we had 5 of them total. Otherwise, it's a crap ton of meat. We got 5 rows of quarters and front shoulders. Got a whole rib cage down there on one of the smaller ones. We got our work cut out for us, but we hauled all these back from North Dakota, got them hanging in the walk-in cooler for about a week, week and a half, letting them dry age just a little bit. And the next step is breaking all this down, getting it all processed.
All right.
Are your hands clean?
That's a big one. So you got your neck, goes into your rib. It's really your loin is back here. And you got the rib eyes that go into the New York strips, really the loin, strip loin on that end. So it's kind of just like the saddle, I guess. This section would be considered like the saddle. It's like this back part that just kind of spreads. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna remove the shoulder section, which would normally have this arm attached to it, remove the shoulder section from the rib and loin section, cut in between the 5th and the 6th rib bone. Do the same thing on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in between 5 and 6. Make that cut right there.
So this has been hanging in the walk-in for about a week and a half, been dry aging. You can go a little bit longer, but this is about perfect. They brought it in. They've already split it between the 5th and 6th.
5th and 6th rib.
See, I'm paying attention. And then what exactly are you going to do with the front portion of this? What is it good for?
At this point, that's just all going to grind, and your good cuts are gonna be right in here. You find the very last rib bone, and you leave that last rib bone on this loin section. That'll be your New York strips, porterhouses, that kind of thing. This is the start of your loin section, so that would be your New York strips / T-bones. The only difference between a New York strip and a T-bone is if you leave the bone on it, it'll have a little bit of that tenderloin, which is right there, and you just cut the steaks off of that. So that would be a T-bone. If you were to debone this and just take it out, that would be your strip. And the T-bone turns into a porterhouse the further down you go. So more tenderloin on it, it's a porterhouse. So right now, we're just gonna split it down the middle, because technically this is more like a saddle than an actual half. So we're gonna split it down the middle so you get 2 sides of strips right here, and the same with the ribeyes. So this is a meat bandsaw. Basically, it's just for taking care of bigger cuts. This makes processing a whole lot quicker than having to do this with a hand saw. But essentially, it's a start on off right here. This is your gauge to if you're cutting steaks. I'm about to actually go ahead and do that right now. So this would be our strips or our porterhouses. They want porterhouses and T-bones. So I'm gonna separate, just kind of cut it right here, make it a little bit more workable. You still have that bone right there. You can look at it. Really, this is kind of going into the sirloin. Normally, you don't have that bone on a porterhouse, so it's kind of going more into the sirloin section. It'll still eat good, 'cause it's got that tenderloin on it, so we're gonna keep it. You can visually see where you want to cut these based on, honestly, looking at it. If you know that looks like a T-bone, that looks like a ribeye, that's gonna be where you cut it. And you just go straight across right there. Same thing right there. So just use visually and see. So cut it on, blade starts going. This thing is no joke. It'll tear through whatever you put in its path. So obviously you don't want your finger to be one of those things. Whenever you're pushing, you always gotta, man, I learned this the hard way. You always gotta be conscious of where your hands are and the force that you're pushing with. Because if a blade on this snaps, it catches a bone, it pulls your hands into it, it's over with. So you wanna be careful of where your hand placement is and the force that you're pushing into it. Just think, if the blade were to catch, if this were to pull, where's my hand going? So at this point, Just going to square it up a little bit right there. Just taking off an end piece. And I'm just back here, light pressure. Keep your hand on the other side to kind of work it around. That's your first T-bone. T-bone's right there, and I'd say about the next couple are going to be porterhouses. You can tell the difference. So it's just your tenderloin right there. So you got a smaller tenderloin. As it gets bigger, move it into the porterhouses. That looks good. Now we're getting really into the porterhouses here. That's a beautiful cut. If you get to the end, you want to kind of get the last one, but don't want to risk your fingers. You can use something that you've already cut, hold it up there. As far as porterhouses and strips go, that's what we ended up with. Now we're going to take them over, scrape the bone dust off, and they're ready for packing.
And that's where I come in.
Yes, sir. Here you go.
There we go. So he's got everything portioned out to T-bones. I'm gonna come through here and remove some of this bone dust, remove this fat, clean the edges up, make sure there's no sharp fragments of bones, and get this ready to be put in a vacuum seal bag and going in our chamber vac. We're chamber vacuuming it or vacuum sealing it just to make it last longer in the freezer, because this is a lot of meat. It's got to last us through the summer and probably into next year, but we're going to try to do everything we can to make sure it preserves well, holds up, and we get to enjoy it later on down the road. So we got our Meet Your Maker chamber vac. We got 2 T-bones, got them in a heavy-duty bag, simple as it gets. Close the lid, let it do its work. Now, the reason I like these chamber vacs is A, you can vacuum seal water. It doesn't matter. It doesn't leak juice in there. It's going to seal every time. And B, they don't overheat. We use a lot of the regular vacuum sealers, and after you run them for a couple hours on end, man, that heat strip will overheat. It'll start melting your bags, and it's just a pain in the butt. Meet Your Maker, she hangs in there strong. She's got 4 days of work in her. We're going to put her to the test. That's a quality seal on some beautiful T-bones. That's all it takes. So once we get it vacuum sealed, we're gonna go ahead and weigh it, print us a new label. I guess you just pull it off. There it goes, porterhouse steak, 2.6 pounds. It goes right on there. It's got the date, got everything on it. It's ready to go in the freezer.
What we've got right here is the arm with the shoulder blade attached. This was taken off of the shoulder. This was that section we were pointing out earlier that was removed. Normally you keep this attached on a cow. Right here you have your scapula. You can feel on the scapula, there's a center bone that rides right here. You have 2 cuts on either side. Right here, you have your flat iron, which is probably one of the better cuts, probably the only cut we're gonna keep off of this one. So you just ride that bone.
So what's the technique of holding your knife that way? Because all us rednecks hold them the other way.
Yeah, so it depends on what you're doing. This is a good whenever you're doing just straight cuts. Whenever you're doing this, it's called a pistol grip. This is just a lot easier to get in, because what you also want with a bone like this, especially whenever you're doing something like a flat iron, you want a curved blade, something that can actually get in and move it. So you'll have stiff blades, curved blades. Stiff blades are real good for cutting steaks. Curved blades are better for boning. Curved blade is pretty much what I use 99% of the time for everything. And then once you get to scimitars, things like that, butcher knives, that's better for cutting things like ribeyes, whatnot. So you just follow this bone. Eventually you'll get to a joint. See that connective tissue right there? That's, you know, your stopping point. And then you just kind of peel back as you're cutting. And that just comes straight off. So that is flat iron, or top blade is another name for it. You can leave it like this, do it as a roast, that's never bad. You also, the way I like to do it is there's a thick line of gristle that runs down the middle of it. So I'll usually cut a little bit off so you can see that gristle right there, right down there, and then your flat iron is going to be the top and the bottom of that. So this is the challenging part, is to ride that gristle without cutting into too much of either side.
So that looks more like what you're used to seeing at the store when you see a flat iron.
Yep.
It makes sense.
So then you just clean all this gristle off of it. And this stuff, a lot of stuff you really can put into a grinder, like connective tissue. I mean, if you have a good grinder, it should tear all that up, go through a big plate and then a smaller plate.
So on the smaller bison, we're going to keep a lot of these steaks just because it's a lot better meat than what these bigger bison are. So we have 2 what they call mature bison, which are between, I think, 5 and 8 years. And then some of our bigger bison out here are anywhere from 12 to 18 years old. So just like on a deer, just like on a cow, of course, the younger they are, the more tender they're going to be. And these are a little bit better cut steaks on the smaller bison than what it is the big. So we might cook that one before y'all leave, maybe.
Hell yeah. All right, that's just off the other side. Stuff like that, it's just tough. You just can't, I mean,
it's not going to render, it's not going to break down.
It just ain't much you can do with it besides just toss it, so.
And I think too, like, people processing, even people at home cutting steaks, you know, they just see that white material and automatically assume, oh, that's fat. And it's easy to, you know, see that, you know. A lot of this fat that looks like fat is not going to break down. It's just a bad chew or a bad bite.
Yep.
He's removed the flat iron. The rest of this, we're just going to debone, and it's going to grind. So we got 2 front shoulders here. This is the one we've already took the flat iron off. Now all I'm going to do is just take a boning knife and start following this down and just deboning this and cleaning it up. And then all this will go to the table beside us. We got Will here next to us. He's taking all this silver skin, all the blood stain, anything that's not going to grind good, we're just going to remove. And it's going to be in the grind pile. It takes a little work to get them cleaned up and ready for grind, but your finished product will be what you see here, just beautiful, pure red meat that is ready to go in the grinder. It doesn't get any cleaner than that. Guys, we're back at it. Day 2. The guy stayed late last night, got about half of everything knocked out. We're finna knock out the last big hindquarter. That's a hunk of meat right there. Time to do a little learning today. So how many did y'all do yesterday?
4. We had 4 rounds left this morning and 1 shoulder. How many did we start with? We started with 10 of each, right? Well, I guess no, because they had,
Yeah.
it was 10 of each.
10 of each.
Yeah.
So 10 hindquarters, 10 front shoulders.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so we got through 15 yesterday. Holy cow, that's crazy, man. Yeah, we were blowing through it. All right, you got the round. What we're gonna do, starting off, I'm gonna cut this a little bit differently than we did yesterday. Normally what you do whenever you're breaking down a cow, you want to separate your sirloin from your round. This is your sirloin section. This is what you get, your top sirloin, tri-tip picanha. Usually you'd cut it about an inch and a quarter, inch and a half off of the tip of the H-bone there. From about this end of this bone here, where it goes into the tail, straight across. Today I'm just gonna take off the H-bone whole. First you wanna remove the tenderloin. Whenever you separate it right here, you take the loin section and you separate it off in the middle of the last lumbar vertebrae there. So what you have right here connecting into it is the New York strips, porterhouses, T-bone, that type of thing. That's what goes right into this. You can kind of see what almost looks like a strip right there. Yeah. So if you cut it right there, there should be a bone. If you cut it right, there's a bone right here, and you can feel it. That's your cutoff line of where the strips stop and you go into the sirloin section. So
to dumb it down, this would be the right hindquarter, the tail, and just pretend the backbone's going to the head, going that way, and all your strips are coming off, eventually turning into ribeyes.
Yep. They're going this way. So this is the end of the loin itself. And the loin, the strips, and the ribeyes, same muscle, just further down the cow. So it's just continuing down, continue strips, ribeyes, and then goes into the shoulder. So right now, whenever you take that off, also connected to the loin is the top of the tenderloin, or the tenderloin that runs on top here. So whenever you separate that, you have a little bit that remains. So you obviously don't want to waste any of that tenderloin because that's the good stuff. So we go through, just take off this little bit here.
So basically the inner tenderloin of a whitetail, same thing, but on a bison.
Yeah.
A lot bigger.
A lot bigger. Yeah, don't expect to be seeing anything that looks this size if you're doing deer.
If you do, call us. We want to come hunt.
All right, so that would be kind of the tip end of your tenderloin. We'll clean that up later. You get maybe 3-4 cuts out of that. And then from here, you have the H-bone. You got the ball joint that goes right into it. So you can just follow that with your knife, open up that joint, and then you're gonna have just the connective tissue in there. You just cut through it. And you just follow this bone.
And y'all make it look easy.
All the way around. Keep on pulling down. You just use leverage. It helps out a lot using leverage. So you get past that bone. So you're still working with the H-bone. This bone kind of curves. So what you want to do is you're following the curve of the bone with your knife, and just continually cutting around, staying on that bone, making sure not to cut into the meat, because if you cut into the meat, that you're going into sirloin.
Going into good stuff.
Yeah, so you want to keep that stuff. And all this is applicable. We're breaking this pretty much like a cow, as I said, so all this would be applicable to a cow. You can find all the same cuts. That's the cool thing about it, is you can find all the same cuts on a deer, a pig. It's just going to be a lot smaller, a lot harder to recognize.
Yeah, not as prominent.
So we're going to start with taking off the top round. You got 2 seams. One seam that'll make you think that it's the seam you want to go for, and then you start cutting into it, and it's the top round flap is what I call it. Just kind of sits right on top of it. I usually take it off if I'm doing roasts and stuff, but you got a seam right here. That's seam for your flap. If you go a little bit lower, there's a seam right there that sits on top of the knuckle or the sirloin tip, which is a great roast. So you just find that seam, go ahead and break it, and you can just pull and follow the seam and cut.
So I noticed you talked a lot about following seams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Somebody that is first time processing their own deer, would you say a good rule of thumb, as long as you follow a seam, you're really not going to screw up?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's, you know, if you know what you're looking for, you can move pretty quick through it, but always, it's always a safe bet to, if you're cutting, just don't break seams. Just go with the seam, and you're not going to cut into any meat that's important. It's inevitable you're going to eventually, and that's where it comes into having the knowledge of what you're cutting into. But with the round, that's pretty much a general rule around, because it's the most satisfying primal to cut.
But when you get it out, there's no doubt, like, that's the round, because it's round. You know, you got it.
Yeah, and then so it's easy to break just because it's easy to find those seams on it. So you just go around the knuckle. You get the bone right here. You can go straight down from the bone. You'll see another seam right there that's separating the top round from the bottom round. You want to go around the bone on this side, find that seam. That's going to be your shank meat. Just follow that seam the same way. Just keep on pulling back, cutting, pulling back, breaking seam, and just comes easy.
And I will say, like, growing up, we didn't know any better, but we used to, keep our deer on ice in the cooler. Mm-hmm. And when they're wet and slimy, the seams are not nearly as easy to find.
Yeah.
Because everything looks like a seam at that point.
Yeah. And also, whenever you're breaking something with a lot more fat on it, it's a lot harder to find, because you'll have fat coverage over this whole thing. So it takes a little bit more looking, trimming, try to find it.
That's a good shot right there. You can really see the different muscles, no problem.
Yep. So you got your eye round right here, you got your bottom round right here, and your knuckle/sirloin tip. With the separation of the eye round and the bottom round, the seam gets a little tight right down the bottom there. So I usually end up cutting into a little bit of one of them, but it ain't the end of the world.
Oh, that's an awesome piece right there.
Eye round is great. Eye round is a great cut for jerky. We were talking about that yesterday. That's one of my favorites. What I always use is your eye round. We would clean that up same way we'd clean it. Just take all the stuff off the top, trim it up. So now we're getting to separating the bottom round from the knuckle. You got the bone right here. You get your knife. You're going to ride the top of the bone, basically getting the knuckle off of the bone. Then you're just going to ride around it. There we've separated. Just basically you're going around and under the bone, and you separate. You can find yet again. Easy seam right there. And that's going to be your difference between your knuckle and your bottom round. Yeah, so this is how a bone is supposed to look.
Yeah, it looks nothing like maybe you can put a clip in. Yeah, that's what it is. Bone broke right there.
Wow, I've never seen it. And like this, it must have just like healed around and stuff or something, because there's just like everything around it super tough too.
This one looks right.
Yeah, it's supposed to be just one bone. If it's not one bone, you got something wrong with the animal. So you got that joint right there. You just follow the bone to that joint, separate it. You got yourself a bona fide marrow bone. We'll cut that up, we'll trim it up, cut it up a little bit later. All right, so now we got the shank, knuckle, bottom round, and then your sirloin. Take the shank off. Same thing, just finding the seam there. All right, following this seam.
So when I was a kid, when we were doing our own deer processing, we would actually slice that into steaks on a whitetail, and then run it through the cuber or the tenderizer.
Yep.
And it was as good as any. And it gave you a bigger portion of a steak,
Yep. That's the sirloin tip. If we would have removed the sirloin section, then we actually would have the top end of this cut off, and it would be about sitting right here, as you can see. So I pulled it into here. The top bit would be sitting right here. That would be called the ball tip. That's just different name for it, but I wanted to save as much of the tri-tip of the picanha as I could, so I kept all of that attached. So right here, looking at the tri-tip, and this is going to be your bottom round that runs into the picanha. So I'll go ahead and make that separation. Same deal, just following seams. It's pretty easy at this point.
And there's no way, yes, we could have done all this on our own, but we would be here till New Year's.
Yeah,
for real.
Once you know what to look for, it's easy, but it's just one of those things of, it's like learning a language, like you can't just jump into it and expect to know.
Well, we have more than adequate enough equipment to handle a whitetail or maybe one of these. Mm-hmm. But when you throw 5 of these bison in the mix, we don't have the equipment to do it.
Grind alone, man. The grind, that's a huge thing. You're going to have so much trim from this. All right, so this is essentially, that's a full bottom round, but do a magic trick. Now you got a bottom round and a picanha. And that's how you get the picanha. So the picanha is usually just separated. It's on the sirloin side, and you separate it, and it's already looking like that. Same deal with the tri-tip. Find the seam.
Yeah, see, that looks like a tri-tip we would get from the butcher.
Yep.
Right there. Just a little baby version.
Yep.
Perfect.
You got your tri-tip. You picanha and your top sirloin. Both of those came off the bottom here. Just kind of set on top of it like that.
All right, so I know a lot of people are going to look at all these cuts and ask, like, the discoloration we're seeing. All of this meat was processed, you know, in North Dakota, in the field, and plus we brought them back. They've been hanging in a walk-in for almost 2 weeks, so we got a pretty good dry age on them for what we're doing, and a lot of dry blood. So the discoloration is nothing to be concerned about, but it does look different. Just be aware of that.
Yep.
And if you're hanging a deer in a walk-in, you're going to get that same discoloration, you know, from the dry and the dry age. So.
Yep. That's nothing to worry about. A lot of places, I mean, pretty much anywhere you go that dry ages for more than a week, you're going to start getting that discoloration.
Yeah.
The sirloin, so you want to make sure that you're cutting against the grain. You see this little line running here, you want to cut perpendicular to that. So inch and a quarter steaks. That you got yourself top sirloin.
Is that a tattoo for real?
Yeah.
Dude, get a close. This is how we pick our guy. When you want to get a mobile butcher, you ask them, hey, send me a picture of your hand. And if they don't have ruler marks
If it ain't
on their
tatted
finger,
up,
yeah, don't trust them. Get them out of there.
So we got some
At
good
least I
sirloins.
assume that ruler's for meat processing.
Well, you know, it's
I don't know.
multifunctional. It's multifunctional. With the picanha, you normally want to keep a fat cap. That's that's the good stuff. Thing is with wild game, this has got, I'm being field dressed. I just want to be careful with any of the stuff on it. And then also, whenever you're looking at wild game, oftentimes fat is where you're going to have a lot of that gamey flavor. So,
And two, like, especially on beef, like that fat on a picanha is completely different than any fat anywhere else on that cow. I mean, it'll literally start melting in your hand if you watch. You know, it's very, very good fat.
you were asking me yesterday my favorite cut. And I think, honestly, if it were to be a cut, it would probably be picanha. The best experience I've had with a cut of meat is a picanha. I did a sous vide on it. Got a crust on the on the fat cap, dude. It'll melt in your mouth. It's crazy.
It's delicious.
Yeah, it's the top round roast, or it's the top round. So I'm just cutting roast out of it, cleaning it up right now. I usually like to take that flap off. Just makes it a little bit cleaner looking. Same deal, cutting against the grain for a good sized roast. You got yourself one pretty top round roast. This is just the tip end of the fillet, so we're just getting 3 out of it, but obviously it's the filet mignon. You want to keep everything you can.
Dude, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, if you're doing this at home on a whitetail, or maybe you got a wild hare and a processing a hindquarter off a cow or a bison, follow the seams, take your time, and learn as you go, and you'll end up with a pretty good product.
Yep. You can go slow with it and just, following seams is a big deal. Using leverage, just kind of finding the bones, like the joints in the bones, trying to get around that can be the most challenging part. In that situation, you just use leverage, move it around, play with it, figure out a good position for you.
So I take it this is not your average grinder.
This is not the one that you're going to find in your everyday hunter's house. This is more a commercial. It can run about 150 pounds at a time, and this is what you break out whenever you're processing bison. Start it, I usually prime it a little bit, get some of the meat in the augers, just stops friction. With all your grinders, you want to make sure to have plenty of lubrication. Mineral oil is great to use. I spray everything on here down with mineral oil, especially the plate, because what happens is you got an auger in the middle that pulls the meat through here, that goes through a chopping blade, that chops it up and sends it through the die. Right now we've got a medium die. We're gonna run it through once on this, and then we're gonna do a fine. But you have that blade running against that plate, and it's creating a lot of friction. So you wanna make sure you have a lot of lubrication there, because a plate will crack. And whenever you got a lug full of meat, and then a plate cracks, it's a nightmare.
We got everything trimmed up, dumped it in here. We're on our second grind now. We like to grind it twice just to increase the quality of product. Breaks up a lot of some of that sinew, some of that fat that may have been left on the trimmings. But in the end result, you can see this ground right here is perfect. Got great texture, great color. That's what you're looking for when you're grinding bison, venison, you name it. This is the quality of grind you want. And you can get this at your home grinder, just not this quick. So we got all the meat ground up. We got to get it packaged. So what we're using for the ground, just like you see most, wild game processors, anything like that, it's what they use. 1 pound package. We got the new Meat automatic motorized sausage stuffer, which I'm excited about because cranking on them babies sucks. So we're gonna go ahead and start packing these up. I don't really know what to expect as far as how much meat we're gonna get from this, but I'm guessing, man, to be honest, a couple of 1,000 pounds of ground bison. This is what's crazy, is to think about, got a little excited on there. A couple 100 more bags, we might get to call it a day. So on these, what I'd like to do, and I'm not a pro, I'm learning today as we go, but I try to get as much air out of there as I can and slowly push the pedal and just kind of let it push itself off the tube. Once you get to that 1 pound line right there, let off the pedal, kind of let some of the pressure settle because it's going to push some more out when you pull the bag off. Maybe not quite that bad. Again, we're practicing, we're getting better. You may have to ask the professional how you keep this thing getting so excited when you pull the cover off. Benny, don't mind our mess over here. I want your first-hand experience, just first time you use this.
Yeah.
Teach me how to use one properly because he gets a little excited when I get the bag off and keeps going. So
he keeps going.
Yeah.
No, that's usually normal whenever you do that. And I probably would use
a
bigger one just to make it a little bit quicker, but it don't really make much of a difference.
Okay, we'll swap that out. Like I say, this is the brand new motorized one, so we're learning as we go here.
The good thing about these bags is you got a line. It's going to tell you whenever you're close to it.
I'm over here dribbling meat everywhere.
Nah, it's I got a little bit above it, but no, that's always going to happen. It's so frustrating. Like you said, it just gets excited, wants to keep going.
Now we can't be making all this grind. We got to fire up this grill over to see if we're doing a good job. We got to give a little sample, make sure it's good. Benny, I cannot thank you enough, man. We're about a quarter of the way through grinding. We got a ton more work ahead of us, but
sir,
thank you. We could not do this without you. Tell them more about your business, where they can find you. Hey, we might have some people wanting to reach out and hook you up.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, we're Redemption Meat. We're out of Richland, Mississippi. You can find us on Facebook at Redemption Meats. We'll go anywhere around the state. The good thing about us is we're mobile, so we can go out, slaughter at your farm, bring it back, process at our facility, come and pick it up. So reach out to us.
Man, we can't thank you enough. Y'all check this video out, give him a little bit of love, and we'll see y'all next time. That beautiful bison burger, fresh off the grill. Dude, that is outstanding.